Welcome to the first episode of Marketology. I'm your host, Drew Martin, and we have the goal to make you a smarter sports bettor. We're going to be bringing in the top minds in the sports betting industry on both sides of the counter, both professional bettors, where they have had their successes, where they have had their failures, how we can learn from their failures and not repeat them, also their bankroll management. On the other side of the counter, we'll be bringing in the bookmakers, the odds makers themselves, the guys taking your bets, both offshore and in Las Vegas, the real market makers in the industry. So these top minds will be bouncing all kinds of ideas off of them, and with the concepts of, should we only be investing a certain percentage in sports betting? Of course. What kind of percentage should we be betting? Should we be investing in the stock market? Also Bitcoin, what kind of influence that has on the sports betting industry? And getting into different topics as such as when to place your bets. Should we be betting in the beginning of the season, more towards the end of the season? When we're talking about baseball, should we be betting early in the day, late in the day when the lineups are coming out? Or in football, what kind of markets should we be focusing on? The NFL, the big markets, late NFL season betting? What about early season CFL betting? The market isn't as big, but is there more opportunities to make money? We'll be getting into all of those topics, starting off with college football. College football is the sport that I made my leap from, I guess you could say, a straight job in the financial world towards the sports betting world, betting on mostly small conference college football. And when you talk about gambling in college football, combining those two words, you can make the argument that there really isn't a bigger name using those two words than Chris Andrews, the sportsbook director at the South Point Hotel and Casino. He came out last year with season win totals on all 130 college football teams, really a trailblazer in himself. So we'll have him on as our first guest coming on after this break. Welcome back to the second half of Marketology, where we try to teach you how to be a smarter bettor. We have a great guest for you today, Chris Andrews, who is the sportsbook director at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Really a trendsetter. Last year he came out and posted season win totals on all of the college football teams at the FBS level. I think last year we had 129. Now this year we have 130. I'm sure he knows the exact number. But Chris, welcome to Marketology. Glad to have you on.
Well, thanks. I don't have the exact number. I just went through every conference, and when I was done, I was done. They told me later it was 130, so that's what we did.
Okay, I know we added one team this year. I think it's Coastal Carolina, so that either went from 129 to 130 or 130 to 131. It gets kind of confusing. I'm not sure on the exact number.
Well, we got UNC back again this year, too, after a one-year hiatus.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's an interesting point as well. But Chris, you can follow on Twitter at Andrews Sports. He's a great follow, good information, both from a bettor's angle and from behind the counter. So make sure to give him a follow on Twitter. But Chris, just have a couple questions for you, because we're talking to the bettors and trying to teach them how to be smarter sports bettors. So I think you're a great mind to kind of get in between, as far as you've been on a bettor and you've been on the other side of the counter. Can you just explain to the viewers exactly your history on both sides of the counter?
Well, yeah, I came to Las Vegas in 1979. I started working at the Stardust. From there, I went to the Barbary Coast. And then in 1981, I went up to Calneva in Reno and ran that sports book for 22 years. But in between that, I come from a pretty interesting pedigree. My uncle's Jack Franzi, who's well known around Las Vegas as both a bettor and a handicapper and an odds maker, and was a bookmaker in the sense that he was a consultant for Michael Gaughan in his properties, which was, Barbary Coast, then Gold Coast, and he's retired. Michael's retired now, but Michael, of course, owns the South Point, who I work for. And my uncle helped Jimmy Vaccaro all those years. I've known Jimmy since I'm 12 years old back in Pittsburgh. So I have a lot of experience of betting as well as bookmaking, although I tried not to do too many crossovers. I had a couple years where I strictly was a bettor, and a lot of years I was strictly a bookmaker.
Okay, that makes sense. And what would you say are the biggest differences in being a sports bettor and then being a bookmaker?
Well, I think when you're a sports bettor, you can focus in on some the real minutia of whatever sport you're concentrating on. You know, baseball's famous for it. I try to do that myself for basketball and football when I was handicapping those sports. You know, you have your little angles you look at. You know, but when you're a bookmaker, you can't quite get into that. You try to look as much as you can uh, into that minutia, but it's very hard to do for every team. And we talked about 130 college football teams. Well, how about college basketball? There's like 300 some teams. You know, you just can't know every single thing about them. So your perspective is a little more broad, and you're more trying to create a number. And once you've created that number, if you do get bet by one of the wise guys, you have to really respect that and move the number, give it a nice strong move accordingly, because in all actuality, a lot of those wise guys know more than you do when you're bookmaking. Of course, when you're betting, you want to be one of those wise guys. And I'd say the best way to do that, well, if you're in college basketball, I would narrow your focus, you know, just to a smaller amount of conferences. Or if you're a football handicapper, it's a little different because you have a whole week to study for the game. But have certain things that you're looking for on each team, and focus on those very specific metrics.
Yeah, I like to say it's better as a sports bettor to know a lot about a little bit than a little
Yep.
bit about a lot. So that makes a lot of sense. And risk management, I guess, is on both sides of the counter. But would you say it's more important being a bookmaker because you have somebody to answer to a lot of the time?
Well, fortunately for many years, I was one of the owners at Cal Nevis, so we had it constructed where no one, not that I was as wealthy as some of the owners, I certainly was not, but from my perspective, whatever bet I took meant more to me personally than anyone else. And that was always very, very handy because even when the chairman of the board would get called and say, "Geez, Chris did this to me or Chris did that," and the guy says, "Chris is the final word. Whatever he says goes." That's the way we do it. And I've been in some spots where that wasn't the case, but now I'm in a good spot too, where Michael Gaughan, who owns the South Point, 100% owner of the South Point, who really has given me free reign and says, you know, whatever you do, it's your sports book. And if I see something I don't like, I'll let you know. But you know, I've been here for about a year and a half, and Michael and I have never had that discussion. He's backed me 100%, and I hope that continues. So that can be a big difference. But you know, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, your money management is a key tool, whether you are a bookmaker or a bettor. It's just very important both ways, and I can't say which way is more important. They're both very important.
Okay, and I bet you having a good boss like that makes it a lot more fun to come to work every day.
Well, it is fun, and you know, even when you know you have some losing days, and you know, Michael might call me and say, "Well, what happened?" You know, well, we lost, you know, X amount on parlays. He says, "Wow, that sounds like a lot." I said, "Yeah, it is a lot, but it's also nice to have the kind of business where you can lose that much on parlays. It means we're attracting the right kind of customers in here, and you know, I mean, in this racket, those kind of guys, you'll get them by the end of the year. It might take you a little time to get them because they certainly make their scores along the way, but you'll do fine against them in the long run."
Yeah, you bring up parlays. That kind of leads me into another question. What mistakes do you see most from sports bettors?
Well, I would always say bet straight bets and try to get the best of the number. You know, and guys just don't do that all the time. First of all, getting the best of the number. You know, I always say, like, if you're in line, you know, at a sports book, a physical sports book, or you know, if you could be on the internet or whatever, and you know you want to bet the Cowboys, let's say, and the line goes from 3 to 3.5. Well, most guys just say, "Oh, geez, I guess I got to lay 3.5 now on the Cowboys. I wasn't going to lay 3." Whereas a sharp bettor will say, "Well, it was 3, went to 3.5. I guess I'm going to look for it elsewhere or not play the Cowboys." You know, I think guys need to have that discipline. And also, like we were saying, parlays, you can bet correlated parlays, and I think that makes a lot of sense. You bet favorite and over, dog and under, something like that. Or maybe, you're at the end of the season, and if this team wins, the next team probably doesn't need the game, something like that. If you want to put together those kind of correlated parlays, I think that's fine. But if you're just throwing together, you want, the Cowboys to the Steelers to the Patriots, which probably going to get a lot of those this year. That's just not a smart way to bet, and then stick to straight bets is a lot better.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. And just a reminder to the watchers out there, we have Chris Andrews here. He's the sportsbook director at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. And he really is a trailblazer, especially in the sport of college football. Just last year, he put out season win totals on every single one of the college football teams at the FBS level. So, Chris, just to ask you a question or two about that, how did you do last year setting the season wins on every team?
We did okay. We didn't do great. We didn't do terrible. It was tough. It was the first time I booked at using every single team. And in all honesty, I probably think some of the lesser teams, I didn't move quickly enough. Move the juice, move half a game here and there occasionally. But I probably didn't pay as much respect to the wise guys as I should have on some of those lesser teams. Now you get up to schools like, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Alabama. Those aren't that hard to make, to be honest with you. And that's where you get most of your action. But when you get schools down to UMass and Ball State and, Coastal Carolina, schools like that, well, there you got to give it a pretty good move. And I probably didn't move them fast enough last year. I was a little more married to my numbers, which is probably a mistake. And I did not make that this year. I moved numbers a little more aggressively this year when I got bet by a sharp guy.
That makes sense. So the small conference teams it makes sense that they would be a little bit tougher to handicap. So I guess what teams hurt you the most last year or helped you the most last year?
Well, the one story I always love to say, and I've told it a couple of times, we had Miami of Ohio last year, and I put the season win total at 4.5. And right before the start of the season, I don't want to mention his name because he's kind of like a known guy. He's an entertainer, and he came in, and of all the teams, he picked Miami of Ohio to bet over. And, bet me $10,000 on the over. It's a pretty strong bet, especially for a school like that. And, and he was a friend of Jimmy Vaccaro. So Jimmy said, yeah, put him on. That's, he doesn't, he's not a sharp guy or anything like that. Okay, so we put him on. And Miami lost their first 6 games last year. And he bet over 4.5. And I'm thinking, boy, I got to be the smartest guy that's ever lived, taking a bet like that. And, there's no chance this guy can win. And, of course, what did Miami, Ohio do? They won their last 6 games in a row. The first time it's ever been done in college football. Lose your first 6 and win your last 6. So that one hurt me pretty good. And, we like I said, we took a pretty strong bet, 10,000 on a team like that. Had no other action at all on it. So that one kind of hurt us a little bit. I'm a typical bookmaker. I don't remember any of the wins. I only remember the losses. So you're going to ask me which helped me. I'm sure there's a lot of them that helped me. I just don't have to remember them. I always remember the losers.
Yeah, that Miami of Ohio team, that was a crazy team, losing all 6. Then they made a bowl game. That was absolutely ridiculous. So I
can't believe it. And like I said, all I could do now is laugh about it, But at the time, I'm watching every week saying, don't tell me I'm going to blow this bet, please. But I did.
Well, Chris, just one last question, kind of a general question here for the listeners. Do you find your win percentage in sports betting to be higher in the beginning of the season where you as the odds maker have seen the teams less? Or do you find your winning percentage to be higher in the end of the season where you've seen the teams more? So I guess what I'm asking is it harder to handicap a team in the beginning of the season from your side of the counter?
Now, that's a really good question. I've kind of seen it go both ways, but I think our numbers are a little more solid towards the end of the season. There may be, in the beginning of the year, college basketball is much more notorious than college football. But there's always like a team that's going to kind of come out of nowhere, and it seems like certain guys will know that. And there may be a team that's really bad that maybe you weren't quite aware of, and other people were. So that seems to really put a hurt on you early in the season. But by the end of the season, our numbers are pretty solid. The only thing I would say about the end of the season that could be a danger spot is injuries. Injuries, football, let's say, can really stack up, particularly against some of those smaller conference teams. And that's where you really have to kind of keep your eyes open. If you see a team, one of those lower level teams kind of tailing off at the end of the year, sometimes they may have quit on their coach or may have just quit on their teammates. But a lot of other times, and you hate to use that quit word because, they are athletes, but it does happen. But a lot of other times it's just the war of attrition. The Alabamas of the world are much, they're built to withstand that. Whereas like the Eastern Michigans of the world are really not. And sometimes you just have to keep track of the injuries. And for some of these smaller schools, it can be very difficult to find true information. And I would tell you too, sometimes these coaches just don't tell you the truth. So, you have to try to keep track of it and see what, use your best intellect and information to try to put that all together to see what the truth is.
Hey, well, great content, Chris. We really appreciate getting on the other side of the counter with you. Make sure to follow Chris Andrews on Twitter at Andrews Sports. He's the bookmaker at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Stop by there, say hello. They got a great setup, great atmosphere in that sports book. So, Chris, we appreciate you being on Marketology. Best of luck this year, and thank you for being a trailblazer in college football, setting those lines on all 130 teams.
Well, thank you very much. And, you guys have always been very good to me. And just give me a holler. And if we could do this again, it'd be my pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
If you liked the first episode of Marketology, please give us a thumbs up, a like on the page. Also, if you have any questions for future episodes of Marketology, please use the hashtag AskSBR. That's ASKSBR. Or you can feel free to hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Drew Martin Bets. We'll be back later this month with more sports betting topics on how to make you a smarter sports bettor. I'm Drew Martin. This is Marketology. Thanks for tuning in.